At this point, I have done loads of episodes of the aha moment, hundreds of episodes of the aha moments, and I think this one will probably be the most emotional. I don't know if I'm going to get through this without being choked up. I'm not much of a crier, so I don't anticipate outright crying per se, but I do suspect I'm going to have a little bit of a struggle getting through this, because I'm going to talk about the importance of building connection and how I learned about the importance of building connection. Literally, as I'm saying that right now, I can feel my eyes watering up. So welcome back to Monday. I hope you've had a great weekend, and I hope you're excited to hear how important it is to build connections in your life and connections in your life that matter. So welcome back to the aha moments, where every day I share the lessons I've learned in my work as a psychotherapist and in my life to inspire you to live your very best life. I'm your host, Elliott Connie. So I tell people all the time, I feel like I'm rich, like really, really rich. And it has nothing to do with the money in my life. It has to do with the people in my life. In fact, financially, I'm quite confident that I'm not rich. But wealth financially is it's a very subjective thing, right? Because in my westernized world, where I live in an abundant place in, North Texas, and I have access to drinking water, and I have a house, I have a roof over my head, and I have clothes that I can select every day, and all those things, I think I am rich compared to people in other corners of the life, and I'm not rich compared to others. But the way I feel super duper rich is by the connections and the people in my life. And they always say you don't value what you have until you lose it. The last 2 years is really when I realized how wealthy I am in relationship. And I want to talk to you about one particular person. His name is Chris. Chris is such a good friend of mine. He is one of the greatest solution-focused brief therapists that ever lived. In fact, he's one of the greatest psychotherapists that ever lived. He's also one of the greatest humans I've ever known. I'm so lucky to call him a friend. Since, 2009 or so, I have been going to England to visit him. And between 2009 and 2019, those visits increased in frequency and duration. So I would go visit Chris in London, where he lives, upwards of 4 or 5 times a year. And I would stay, a week, 2 at a time. And I've gotten very close with Chris and gotten very close with his family. And then COVID happened. And I remember when COVID happened, I realized COVID was like a shutdown thing on March 11th of 2020. I'll never forget, I was watching a basketball game and right before they started the game got canceled. And the next day, everything canceled. And then the next day, that same day, all the events that I was scheduled to do, all the places I was scheduled to go to lecture, they all canceled. And I remember thinking, it'll just be a few weeks, no big deal. And then as the weeks turned into months, I realized how much I miss people. As I traveled around the world, I got to see some really cool things. I got to experience some really cool things. But what I don't think I realized to the gravity that I should have was I got to meet some really cool people and stay connected. None more impactful in my life than Chris. And as the months turn into years, and I sit here right now, I can't even tell you how much I miss Chris and his family. I feel myself really welling up about it now. I really miss him. And the restrictions are now over, the COVID world. We have to kind of figure out a way to live with this. But traveling is so complicated. My work life is more complicated. The world is just different now, so it's hard to get to England. And I just miss him so badly. Because now I realize, life is not about money. It's not about stuff. It's not about things. It's about people and the meaningful connections that you make. At one time I would have told you what I love so much about Chris is we could have these really deep, in-depth conversations about our professional work, because we're colleagues and we work in the same space. And I still do enjoy those things. Those things matter to me. Those things are important to me. They still are a piece of me. But what I miss more than anything now is taking a walk with Chris and listening to him share stories about his younger life. Chris has lived in London for a really long time, and he's 30 years older than me. Chris just celebrated his 76th birthday. I'm about to have my 46th. And we would go for walks in London, and he would point to a building. He'd say, I used to have an office in there. Or we'd walk in another area, and he would say, I lived in this neighborhood back in the 70s, or whatever it would be. And right now, that's what I miss. I miss a hug from Chris. I miss his laughter and his smile. I just miss him. And one of the things it's done to me now is it helps me take stock in the relationships I have now, because I don't ever want to only learn about the relationship being important by losing it. I don't ever want to have that happen again. So I want to remind you to hug the people in your life a little bit tighter. Take a moment to have gratitude for the people in your life and the people that matter, because one day they may be gone for whatever reason. I never thought I would not be able to see my friend Chris as often as I wanted to because of a global virus. I never, ever thought that would happen, but you never know. So take stock in the meaningful relationship in your life, because I promise they're making you rich too. thank you so much for being here, guys. Please share this podcast on your social media platforms with at least one person that you think could benefit from hearing this message today. It would really mean the world for you to help me spread the word of this podcast. And please don't forget to become a subscriber. You can do that wherever you enjoy listening to podcasts, whether it's Apple, Spotify, Simplecast, wherever. You can also become a Patreon subscriber and get bonus material each and every week, including extra episodes and transcriptions from each and every podcast. Love you guys. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Communication skills are really, really important when it comes to the task of building connections. After almost 20 years of working with couples and working with hundreds, maybe even thousands of people that came to therapy because they want to learn to become better communicators, I want to share with you today the keys to building connections and becoming a better communicator. It's actually going to be simpler than you think. So welcome back to the Aha Moments, where every day I share the lessons I've learned in my work as a psychotherapist and in my life to inspire you to live your very best life. Of course, I'm your host, Elliott Connie. And look, here's the biggest mistake people make when it comes down to being a better communicator and building connections. And I'm going to give you some examples today. But the biggest mistake people make is they think of themselves or even describe themselves as bad at communicating. Every person on the planet is good at communicating. That's a very, very important thing to identify. Once you realize you're already good at it, then you can look at your ability to build it from a strengths-based perspective. So, for example, couples will come to me all the time and they'll say, we're not great communicators. And I'll say things like, so how did you agree upon a therapist to see, and how did you decide what time and day the session would be, and then arrange for yourselves to be here? Because oftentimes that requires like arranging rides and picking up or dropping off kids and arranging childcare. And then they tell me these amazing things that they're able to do through their communicating, but they don't recognize it. Like they don't recognize they're good at it. So part of my job is to point out how you're already doing it well and then help you find opportunities to do more of that thing. Like that's the key process here. Like that's the key to being able to do this, is recognizing that we already do this pretty well. We already do this pretty okay. It almost like gives us permission to do more of it. And I think the other thing is to realize the biggest mistake that we make in terms of communicating is we communicate as if we're communicating with someone who is like us, instead of communicating with our partner and whatever our partner's style of effective communication is. And I'll give you an example. So I've worked with tons of couples where like one of them, and I'm thinking of a specific couple right now, but like where they're complete opposites, where it's one of them really likes physical affection and the other one really likes words. So the person who likes words will give their partner words, and the person that likes physical affection will give their partner physical affection. And then they're like, how come they don't understand how much I love them? And the answer is because you're communicating with them like they are you. You have to understand what it is that triggers someone's communication. In this particular case, one partner really likes physical affection. So the other partner, the best way to say I love you is through physical touch and affection. And if they like words, then their partner has to give them words that communicate how much I love you and how I feel about you. That's how you effectively communicate. Communication is a style of saying and or doing something so the person that I'm communicating with perceives the message I'm trying to give them. So in essence, you have to send them that message in their language, not yours, or else they'll never receive it. I know that sounds overly simple, but it's wildly effective to understand I have to communicate with you in the way that your style allows you to receive it, not necessarily just telling it to you the way I want to tell it to you. Once you understand those two things, that there are no people on the planet that are bad at communicating, and communication is me understanding how I need to give it to you, then that's a game changer. It makes us so much better at the task of communicating and building connections. And there's nothing on this planet like having connections in your lives. It makes life more meaningful, it makes life more rich, makes life more worth living. And it just makes the hugest difference in the world. And you can't have that without effective communication. So you know what I want you to do? I want you to reach out to someone that you haven't talked to in a while and just ask them how they're doing, how life is going, and practice these effective communication skills. I'm certainly going to pick someone that I haven't reached out to in a while and give them a call. So, thank you so much for being here. I hope this message meant something to you. If it did, please share this podcast on your social media platforms or with at least one person that you think could benefit from hearing this message today. And also, don't forget to subscribe. You can do that on Apple, Spotify, Simplecast, wherever it is you enjoy listening to podcasts. You can even become a Patreon subscriber and get bonus episodes each and every week, along with transcriptions of each and every episode. I love you guys so much. Thanks for being here, and I can't wait to see you tomorrow. There's one thing that's true universally amongst all human beings, but yet so many people say that it's not true about them. But according to research, it's true about all human beings. And I'm going to talk about what that thing is and why it's so important that we all understand it. So welcome back to the Aha Moments, where every day I share the lessons I've learned in my work as a psychotherapist and in my life to inspire you to live your very best life. Of course, I'm your host, Elliott Connie, and I want to talk to you about loneliness. Like this week, we've been talking about the importance of connection, but I want to talk to you about when you don't get that connection right and the importance of loneliness. One of the biggest triggers to lots of psychological issues is loneliness. So there's a study done years and years ago, and it's kind of like an unethical study. They did it lots of years ago, where they took newborn babies and they provided them with nourishment, like they gave them food and water and milk and all of those things. But they got their food, water, and milk and all that stuff delivered by a robot. And there was another group of babies that got their food, water, and milk delivered by a human being, where they like sat on a human being's lap and they were held and nurtured and cared for as they got fed. The babies who were being nurtured and cared for did really well, and they gained weight and they grew and they developed. The babies who didn't developed this thing that we call failure to thrive. They eventually stopped eating. They eventually stopped growing. Oftentimes they got really ill, and that's called failure to thrive. And it highlights one of the things that happens when we don't have appropriate connections is we literally start to suffer. It causes psychological problems. Even in like newborn babies, like it's really, really bad. And yet I hear people tell me, like as a marriage counselor, people come to my office and they say like, I don't like being held. I don't like being touched. And I can tell you there's something that happens to your mood. Because the simple truth is we all need physical touch. We all need connection, emotional and physical. We all need to feel like we belong. Because when we feel lonely, our mood suffers, our psychology suffers. We often try to medicate that with drugs and alcohol. We try to seek out connection in other places, in other areas, and that invites problems into our lives, like infidelity, for example. We have to acknowledge that as a human species, like we desire connection. I remember being a kid, one of my favorite, I just loved cartoons as a kid, and one of my favorite cartoons was The Jetsons. And those of you not old enough to remember, The Jetsons was a cartoon about the future in like the 80s, and there were flying cars and robot maids. It was just a really futuristic cartoon. And now here we are living in the future. We're in the 2020s, and there are no flying cars, there are no flying skateboards, there's no robot maids. What we did as a species, the technological advances we made were about connection. We invented cell phones. We created the ability to have FaceTime. We built social media platforms so we could reach out to people. We're so desirous of connection that the majority of our technological advances weren't about flying cars and all these crazy things. They were about things that allow us to feel connected to one another. They were about things that allowed us to like reach out and touch one another digitally. Like think about the world we live in now and how crazy it once was that you could pick up a phone and talk to somebody while you're looking at their face. That's a crazy thing. That's how much we crave connection. We built tools that make connection more likely even in a digital space and utilize those tools to do remarkable things as we go through the pandemic. So I want you guys to understand that loneliness has a consequence. Loneliness impacts us throughout our life cycle, and loneliness is something that we have to solve. A friend of mine works at a retirement home and for elderly people. And they say the elderly people that do well are the ones that have people come visit them and have meals with them and sit with them. And they always say like the best thing that impacts The home where they work is when volunteers come and just talk to the elderly people. We need to be connected, everyone. That's why we're here. So let's connect. Let's remember we're neighbors. Let's remember that's when we're at our best and not accidentally end up lonely, because that's when we suffer. That's when we're harmed. So don't let your neighbors suffer by being lonely. It takes 2 seconds to be kind, 2 seconds to reach out, 2 seconds to be nurturing, but it can have a significant impact on someone's life. So what I want you to do is try to do 2 things. Reach out to someone in your life that's impactful, and allow other people to reach out to you so you don't accidentally put yourself in a situation where you're accidentally going to experience the consequences of loneliness. Thanks for being here today. I really appreciate it. You guys mean the world to me that you allow me to share with you. So I just want to say thank you and ask you to please help me reach more people by sharing this podcast on your social media platforms, or with at least one person that you think could benefit from hearing this message today. And also, don't forget to subscribe. You can do that wherever you enjoy listening to your podcast: Apple, Simplecast, Spotify, wherever it is. You can even become a Patreon subscriber and get bonus episodes each and every week, along with transcriptions from each episode. Thanks again, guys. I love you so much for letting me share with you, and I can't wait to see you tomorrow. Having a connection with other people in your life is a really big deal, and it matters. It impacts our lives in profound ways, and I hope as we go through this topic this week, you're starting to see that. Well, today I'm going to talk to you about the most impact, like the biggest thing that people that you're connected with bring into your life, and how to manifest it, how you can create it, how you can get it and benefit from it in your life. So welcome back to the Aha Moments, where every day I share the lessons I've learned in my work as a psychotherapist and in my life to inspire you to live your very best life. And today I'm going to talk to you about 3 significant connections I have in my life and why they matter. The first one is my business partner, the woman who runs my company. Her name is Anna Francis. I want to talk to you about how you can tell when you have a connection with somebody and why it matters. So the way I met Anna, I travel around the world teaching solution-focused brief therapy and use the internet to reach people that are interested in that particular topic. And Anna was someone that was interested in my work. It just so happened that I went to New Zealand, the country where she lives, and was giving a lecture, and Anna came and she said she wanted to participate in my world, in my work world. So it just so happened that at that time we had a position vacated, somebody to run some of our trainings. Anna volunteered to do so. And it just seemed that we got along and we clicked, and things that I was interested in and she was interested in. And I'm talking about in terms of work interest. And I remember her saying she wanted to play a bigger role. And we started talking about whether or not it was going to be a role as in like employment or what ultimately became partner. And she said, what's really important to me is if we form this partnership, at some point in the future, I want to know that my partnership with you mattered, like it led to something good happening. And that was a sign to me that this was a very impactful connection in my life. And the reason that you should know it is the people that you're connected with should want good for you. The people that you're connected with are the people in your life that want you to win. And they want so badly for you to win. Like Anna actually overtly said, I don't want to just do this. I want to do this knowing that I'm having a positive impact on your life and on your business. And that's special. That's important. So that's person number 1. Person number 2 is one of the people that I refer to as there are 3 people on the planet I refer to as my best friend. One of them is a guy named Matthew. You've heard me talk about Matthew on this podcast. But one of the ways that Matthew and I have stayed connected is through loyalty. I've known Matthew for almost 30 years, somewhere between 25 and 30 years. In that time, he has never done anything but shown support to me as a person. Matthew he's interested in like what's good for me. He's interested in what like matters to me. If I'm going to make a bad decision, Matthew is the first one to be like, nah, man, you got to think about it like this, this, or this. Like those things matter, and they matter a great deal. And you got to keep those people around you because they help you win. They help you succeed. Like they really, really matter to you. Matthew is that person that I feel safe and comfortable that I can share anything with him. When someone's truly connected to you, not only can you share your down moments and they will help lift you up, but you can share your up moments and they won't bring you down. Like sometimes we have people in our lives that when we share our wins and we share the things going well, it makes them jealous or envious. You know, you got to pay attention to the people in your circle that clap for you. And Matthew is the loudest clapper. Matthew is the one that I can tell anything to, and he is there for me. And then last, I'm going to talk to you about another person I refer to as my best friend, and that is Adam Frower. Adam Frower is my guy, man. And one of the things that also people you're connected with do is they expose who they are to you. Last week, I went to Adam's hometown, Provo, Utah, and he introduced me to his life. You know what I'm saying? He introduced me to where he grew up, the origin story of Adam Frower. I've known Adam for over a decade, but this is the first time I got to see his origin story. I got to see his family. I got to see where he's from. I got to see where he was crafted and where he grew from. And when you are really connected to someone, they share who they are with you. And that matters. That really, really matters. When you have connections like this in your life, you just have a richer lived experience. You just have a richer life in a way that really, really matters. And that's what I want you guys to understand. It requires vulnerability. But pay attention to the people in your life because those connections are there. You just have to notice it and see it. And I'm so thankful for the people that showed me who they were and allowed me to be connected to them because it makes the biggest difference in our lives. So I want you to think of someone that's important to you and reflect on how you communicate with them and how you knew they were significant connections in your life. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to listen to this podcast. I actually love you for it, so thank you. Please help me reach more people by sharing this podcast on your social media platforms or with at least one person that you think could benefit from hearing this message today. And don't forget to become a subscriber. You can do that at Apple, Spotify, Simplecast, literally anywhere you enjoy listening to podcasts. You can also become a Patreon subscriber and get bonus material each and every week, including extra episodes and transcriptions from each and every episode. Thank you guys so much. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. One of the most magical and cool things about a connection is when you form a connection with someone that time and distance cannot break. You know that kind of connection that no matter how much time it's been since you last talked and no matter how far apart you live, it just seems like every time you talk, it just kind of picks up where it left off. I'm lucky enough to have a friend like that. I'm lucky enough to have a connection like that in my life. And recently kind of went into that connection. And today I want to talk to you about that connection and how it impacts my life. So welcome back to the Aha Moments, where every day I share the lessons I've learned in my work as a psychotherapist and in my life to inspire you to live your very best life. Of course, I'm your host, Elliott Connie. So you've heard me talk on this podcast about this person before. His name is Kyle. He's my best friend that I grew up with. He lived across the street from me, a little bit down the street, but across the street, basically. And he is family, and his family is family. And because of my work and, his life, having 3 kids and being a busy dad with coaching things and that sort of stuff, I don't get to spend as much time around him as I'd like to. I don't get to spend as much time around his family as I'd like to. But this past couple months ago, I went to Massachusetts and got to spend some time around Kyle and his parents and his kids. And it was literally almost like no time had passed. Kyle's hair is a little bit grayer, my hair is a little bit goner. His kids are older, his daughter's a senior in high school and thinking about college next year. So obviously time has passed, but it was also like we hadn't skipped a beat. We sat around, he has a fire pit in his yard, and we sat around his fire pit just kind of chatting and talking and connecting. And it was literally no time has passed. When I was a kid, Kyle and I used to hang out in his room playing video games. And he had a window that you could open the window and climb out on the roof. And we would put bean bags on the roof. And we would sit on that roof talking. Just talking about the future and our goals and our dreams, what we wanted to accomplish in our lives. And it's weird a bit to be in the future, having accomplished certain things and we're in the future that we talked about back then. But we were just, back then we were 12-year-olds sitting on these beanbags on Kyle's roof, talking about life, or at least life as we understood it as 12-year-olds back then. And here, fast forward, like I said, we're a little older, a little grayer. Our knees kind of crack when we stand up. But here we are in that future. But instead of sitting on beanbags on his roof, we're sitting around a fire pit at his house. And, there's a wife sitting next to him, my cameraman sitting next to me, and, 3 kids sitting around the fireplace that obviously weren't there when we were kids sitting on the beanbags. But it was the same conversation. it was the same energy, it was the same vibe between me and Kyle. And it will always be. And there's a security in that. There's a safety in that. We live in these worlds where, like, people know me as this, like, well-known psychotherapist known all around the world and impacting people's lives and writing books and doing the things that I do. But Kyle, like, knows me. Kyle knew me before anything changed. Kyle knows me. And when the world gets crazy, there's a calmness being around people that have known you, like they know you. Those vibrations in your life where you just know we will always have that same energy. It's a really wonderful and impactful thing that I'm so lucky and so glad that I get to enjoy. It was also like that with his parents. Like, I went to go visit his parents and we live in the same house where I used to kind of sneak in the back door. I say sneak in, that's because I was like family, so I had permission to like come in whenever I wanted and that sort of thing. But it's just such a beautiful thing to be able to sit in that space with these people and just vibe with them. And I hope all of you have someone in your life that is like that. Like, no matter how much time, space, or distance it has been, you can still just rock with them. There's a safety there. And I want you guys to enjoy that. So just, reach out to those people if you haven't talked to them in a while. Because it's a magical thing when it happens. So that's my task for you this week. Reach out to someone where you have that kind of connection with and just watch the impact it has on your life. Thank you for listening to this week. Thank you for listening today. Thank you for listening to this topic about connections. I think it's super important. Please help me spread the word of this podcast by sharing it on your social media platforms or with at least one person that you think could benefit from hearing this message today. And don't forget to become a subscriber. You can do that at Apple Podcasts, Simplecast, Spotify, wherever it is you enjoy listening to your podcast. You can also become a Patreon subscriber where you get bonus episodes and also transcriptions from each and every episode. I love you guys so much. Thanks for being here, and I can't wait to see you on Monday.